When this missing boy simply walks out of the woods after 11 years of being missing, his mother turns pale when she sees who is behind him. Jenny Martin never skipped her annual hike through the woods on the edge of Greenwood. Each year she returned to the spot where her son Nathan had disappeared exactly 11 years ago. It had been a crisp autumn day with bright orange and red leaves crunching under her boots. Nathan, just 7 years old, had worn his superhero costume, full of life and energy as he darted ahead on the trail. That day, he had begged her to let him run ahead on his own, just for a moment down the familiar path. She had agreed, thinking there was no harm in giving him a bit of adventure. But when she reached the clearing where he should have been, Nathan was gone, vanished without a trace. Search parties had scoured the forest for weeks. Dogs, helicopters, and volunteers had covered every inch of the woods, but no sign of Nathan was found. Jenny's life had been stuck in that moment ever since. Now the forest stood before her, a monument to her grief, its dark branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Yet as long as she could breathe, she would continue this ritual, driven by an unyielding hope that her boy was somewhere out there. As Jenny walked the familiar trail, the crunch of leaves under her feet seemed unusually loud. The forest was eerily silent, missing its usual birds and rustling wind. She pulled her coat tighter around herself, a chill creeping through despite the mild air. It felt as if the woods were holding its breath, and with each step, the sensation of not being alone grew stronger. The deeper Jenny went into the forest, the stronger the feeling of being watched became. She reached the clearing where Nathan had disappeared, and she knelt down, placing a small toy car, a replica of his favorite, on the ground. She had been leaving these toys for years, a token of her undying love, with many of them now partially buried under leaves or moss. "Happy birthday, Nathan," she whispered, her voice trembling as she stared into the dense trees. "I'll never stop looking for you." Jenny's words seemed to hang in the air without a response. As she stood up, she noticed a flicker of movement at the edge of the clearing, like a shadow slipping through the trees. Her heart skipped a beat. She squinted, trying to see a figure, but it felt like the forest was playing tricks on her. "Hello," she called out, her voice cracking slightly. "Is someone there?" A soft rustling came from the bushes. She took a step back, her eyes quickly scanning the woods. Suddenly a figure emerged, a tall, gaunt young man with ragged clothing hanging loosely on his thin frame. He stood still, just at the edge of the clearing, as if he had been waiting for her to notice him. "Who are you?" Jenny asked, her voice filled with a mix of fear and something else, maybe a bit of hope. The young man remained silent. He stared at her with such an intense gaze that it sent a shiver down her spine. As he stepped forward, his face caught the light, and she saw it. Those green eyes, that jawline, the features were unmistakably familiar. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her knees felt weak as she realized the young man before her looked just like her lost son, though older, leaner, and covered in scars that marked his once cherubic face. Jenny's legs shook as she stepped closer to him. "Nathan, is it really you?" she asked, her voice full of hope, but edged with caution. The boy didn't respond right away. He seemed to study her, as if trying to remember if she was someone he knew. Then he tilted his head slightly and said in a rough, cracked voice, "I got lost." In the simplicity of his words took Jenny by surprise, and for a moment all the years of pain and searching came rushing back. She took another step toward him, her hand outstretched, but there was something unsettling about his manner. His eyes, though familiar, seemed empty, as if part of him was gone. "Where have you been?" she asked, tears welling up in her eyes. "We've been searching for you, Nathan." "I never stopped looking." But Nathan didn't reply. His eyes moved past her as if something else beyond her was more important. Jenny turned to see what he was looking at, her breath catching as she saw they weren't alone. From the thick forest behind Nathan, a man appeared, tall and thin like the boy, wearing clothes that were in tatters. His hair was messy and his eyes had a wild, unsettled look. He moved slowly and purposefully until he stopped just a few steps behind Nathan. Jenny felt her face go pale and her blood run cold. She recognized the man at once. It was Jack, her estranged husband and Nathan's father. He had vanished shortly after Nathan went missing, and many in the town suspected his sudden disappearance indicated he was guilty of something. Yet here he was, looking like the passing years had worn him down just as much as they had Nathan. Jenny's mind spun as she stared at Jack, who now seemed like a man aged by decades in just 11 years. His clothes were dirty and frayed, his skin pale and worn, and his eyes, once familiar, now held a new darkness, as if they had seen something terrible. Nathan stood a few steps behind him, disturbingly quiet, his gaze locked on Jenny but seeming to look right through her. "Jack, what happened to you?" Jenny's voice shook as she tried to make sense of the bizarre scene. "What happened to Nathan? Where have you been?" Jack glanced at Nathan before looking back at Jenny. His expression was weary, as if he bore the burden of unspeakable events. "We got lost," he said quietly, his voice rough and hoarse. "We found another way of living." "What do you mean?" Jenny asked, her heart racing as she caught a strange calmness in Jack's voice, like he was repeating rehearsed lines. "Why didn't you come back? Why didn't you try to get help?" Jack took a step closer, moving slowly. "We did try at first," he replied, "but after a while the forest started to feel like home. We met people out there, living off the grid, away from society. It's a place where you don't have to be found if you don't want to be." His eyes went to Nathan, who remained silent, his expression empty and detached. Jenny's stomach knotted with fear. "People? What people?" she asked, her voice rising. "Are you saying there are others out there living in the woods?" Jack nodded, his face serious but calm. "Yes, there are. Families, groups. They've been living out there for years, keeping to themselves, following their own ways. It's simpler than here, Jenny." Jenny tried to take in what Jack was saying, an eerie chill filling the clearing. "Are you saying you've been living with some kind of off-grid community?" she asked quietly. "Why would you stay there? Why would you keep Nathan there?" Jack's lips formed a thin, unsettling smile. "It's not a community, Jenny. It's more than that. We found a way of life that works for us, a place where we don't have to answer to anyone and can live by our own rules." He spoke with an intensity that made Jenny's skin crawl, his words almost reverent. The realization hit Jenny hard. "It sounds like a cult," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Did you join some kind of cult? Is that where you've been keeping Nathan? What did you do to him?" A shadow crossed Jack's face, a flicker of defensiveness in his eyes. "It's not a cult," he replied sharply. "It's a way of living free from the corruption and chaos of the outside world. The people there, they've chosen to live in harmony with the forest, to escape the madness of modern life." Jenny took a step back, shaking her head in disbelief. "Modern life? You mean the life you had here, with me, with your family? You took our son and hid him away from the world. How could you do that?" Her voice broke as she looked at Nathan, whose expression was disturbingly blank. "Jenny, you don't understand," Jack said, stepping closer. "There's a peace out there you can't find here. It's hard to explain until you've lived it. Once you have, it changes you. It opens your eyes." Jenny's throat tightened with a mix of anger and fear. "What do you mean it changes you?" "What happened to you out there?" she asked, her eyes darting between Jack and Nathan. "What did those people do to you?" Jack stayed calm even as Jenny's panic grew. "They didn't do anything to us, Jenny," he said quietly. "They just showed us another way to live, a place where we could be free and be together." Together, Jenny repeated, her voice shaking with anger. You call this being together? You've taken Nathan away from everything he knew. Look at him, he's changed. She pointed to Nathan, who looked blankly ahead, his eyes lifeless. He's not the same boy I remember. What did they do to him? Did they brainwash him? What are you trying to do, Jack? Jack's calm demeanor slipped for a moment, revealing something guarded and dark. Nathan is different now, he admitted quietly. He's had to adapt. We both have. You wouldn't understand. Jenny's heart ached. There was a part of Jack's story that he was hiding, something buried in his cryptic words. The idea of an off-grid community so isolated that they'd been out of sight for over a decade filled her with dread. What exactly had they been doing out there in those woods? What practices or beliefs had changed her son so deeply? I want you both to come back with me, she pleaded, reaching for Nathan. Come home, Nathan, please. We can fix this. We can get help. Nathan's eyes met hers briefly, and she saw a flicker of recognition, a hint of the boy she had known. Jack placed a hand on Nathan's shoulder and looked at Jenny with a mixture of pity and resignation. We are home, Jenny, Jack said softly. We're not leaving. The words hit her hard, and she stepped back. This isn't right, she said, her voice breaking. This isn't you, Jack, and it isn't Nathan. You've been twisted by whatever you found out there. You need help. Both of you. Jack's face hardened. We don't need help, Jenny, he said coldly. It's you who needs to let go. There are things out here you wouldn't understand, things that change you, and once you've changed, there's no going back. As Jack spoke, Jenny felt the weight of his words. There was a strange quality to his voice, as if he was trying to explain the deep meaning of the life he had chosen. But behind his calm speech, she sensed something dangerous, something that had corrupted him. It wasn't just about living away from society. It was as if the woods had taken hold of them, changed them into something unrecognizable. Please, Nathan, she whispered, her voice breaking as she reached out one last time. Come back with me. But Nathan only shook his head, his eyes vacant and distant, a stranger wearing her son's face. The boy she knew was gone, and the realization struck Jenny with a chilling coldness. Jack and Nathan turned back toward the woods, fading into the darkness from where they had come, leaving Jenny alone at the edge of the clearing, shaking with fear and anger. Jenny stumbled out of the forest, her mind a chaotic mix of disbelief and terror. She made it to her car and dialed 911, her hands trembling as she recounted the encounter with Nathan and Jack. The dispatcher listened carefully as Jenny described finding her son and husband alive after all these years, still out there in the woods. Within an hour, the police arrived. Officers searched the area, flashlights cutting through the dense trees as they called out for Nathan and Jack. Jenny stayed by the trailhead, wrapping her arms around herself for warmth, watching helplessly as the search continued late into the night. But as dawn broke, it was clear there would be no miraculous reunion. The officers found no sign of Nathan or Jack, no tracks, no campsites, nothing to indicate anyone had been living in the woods. It was as if they had vanished, swallowed by the forest once more. One senior officer, Detective Hughes, approached Jenny, his expression cautious. "Ma'am, are you sure you saw your son and your husband out here?" he asked gently. "The team didn't find anything, not even a footprint." Jenny felt a surge of anger and frustration. "Of course I'm sure," she snapped. "I know my own son. I saw him and Jack. They were right there, just beyond the clearing." The detective sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "We'll keep looking, but it's possible." He hesitated. "It's possible that grief can play tricks on the mind, especially in a place like this." Jenny glared at him. "I'm not imagining things." "They were here," she insisted, but deep down even she felt a sliver of doubt. Could it have been a trick of the light? Had years of grief and longing finally made her hallucinate? Days passed, and despite repeated searches, there was still no sign of Nathan or Jack. The authorities started questioning Jenny's mental state, suggesting she see a grief counselor and maybe stay with friends or family for support. Detective Hughes was kind but firm on his final visit to her. Sometimes our minds crave closure so much that they create it themselves, he said gently. If we find new evidence, we'll reopen the case. But for now, it's best if you try to move forward. Jenny felt a chill at the thought. Move forward? How could she when her son was still out there in the forest? She couldn't stay in Greenwood, where the trees on the horizon constantly reminded her of her loss. Everywhere she looked, those haunted green eyes seemed to stare back at her. Jenny decided to sell her house and leave Greenwood behind. As she packed, every item was a reminder of 11 years of grief and memories. The last thing she took down was Nathan's old framed photo from the living room wall, the same picture she had used in every missing poster over the years. As she drove away, she glanced in the rear-view mirror, half expecting to see Nathan's shadowy figure in the woods. But all she saw was the dense thicket of trees standing silently under the gray sky. The toy cars she had left at the clearing were now reclaimed by the forest, swallowed up by leaves and soil as if they had never been there. Jenny moved to a town several hours away where the woods didn't press against every road. She tried to build a new life, to leave the past behind, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Nathan was still out there. Or perhaps something else was pretending to be him. No one ever saw Nathan or Jack Martin again, and the people of Greenwood whispered about Jenny's story for years. Some believed her, convinced that the forest had dark secrets. Others thought she was just a grieving mother who had lost touch with reality. But those who hiked the old trails sometimes claimed that late at night, they could see a shadowy figure standing just beyond the clearing, watching them with eyes that glinted like emeralds. What a truly eerie story. Do you think Jenny actually saw her son and husband, or did she imagine it all? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Until next time.